Okay. Hi everyone.
Hello.
Nice to meet you all. My name's Chris, and we're going to be going through your webinar, Understanding ISO 45001. Apologies, I didn't know the event had started then. Um, just start looking at my gormless face. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through. There's me and my colleague Michael. Michael
Hello.
also
Yeah.
also works for Citation. So I'm an ISO consultant and a technical specialist working within Citation ISO certification. I'd like to hand it over to you, Michael. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Michael Brown. I'm Citation's Health and Safety Content Manager. So I used to be one of the field consultants. Before that, I was an in-house health and safety advisor for a research and development company. We had everything on site from radiation bays where we were zapping and X-raying bits of metal, right the way through to a hotel randomly. So yeah, it was quite a learning curve and various different industries in there. So yeah, as part of Citation's team, I used to do all of the sort of visits where I'd go out and actually see your premises. So I'll talk a bit more about that later on. But now I manage all of their content, anything you might interact with, download, and do things like this, which is great. But yeah, we are just getting used to this new platform. I've just seen there's quite a few people that have joined now, which is great. But the layout, when you've got a different layout and you just go, oh goodness. And even though you've done it 100 times, it just throws you. I can see Richard and Luke have said good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, hello, both of you as well. No, should be a good session today, but I will hand back to you, Chris, because you are leading.
Perfect. So I work in for ISO Citation. I've worked within an ISO role for probably about 10 years now. I specialize in more in environmental than health and safety, but health and safety is part of the package. It's one of the ISO certifications that I do. So I tend to go in and write management systems that will make sure that your health and safety controls are aligned with the requirements of ISO 45001. So let's talk you through a little bit of ISO 45001 and what we're going to be achieving today. So we're going to give you a little bit of an introduction to 45001. We're going to talk about a little bit what it involves, a little bit about ISO. We're going to talk about what businesses need ISO 45001, what are the requirements to obtain certification, and then what the benefits are. And then what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to tie that into how Citation Health and Safety can help you with that. One of the great things about this standard with us in ISO Certification Limited and Citation Health and Safety is they work very, very well together. So a little bit about Citation. We can provide you support right from across group, from certification right through to health and safety support. We've implemented about 30,000 management systems. We have 60 consultants across the board, all over the country, specializing in lots of different standards as well. Our aim is to come chat with you, understand your internal processes and procedures, and tailor a management system that works for yourself, but also meets the requirements of the particular ISO that you'll be going for. And we're over 30 years old, just recently joining the Citation brand at the beginning of this year. So ISO 45001. So first thing before I start, well, let's talk about ISO themselves. So the International Standards Organization, what they do is they'll write management systems for specific areas. So 45001 is the occupational health and safety standard. There's ISO 9001, which is probably more common, which is the quality management system, and then 14001, which is environmental. So what happens with ISO is they'll release a standard, and every 10-ish years, they'll tend to update. As time and business evolves, so do the standards. So we need to make sure that the standards are keeping up to date. So what we'll do is we'll come in and make sure that your system is up to date on an annual basis. 45001 is designed to prevent any work-related injuries, accidents, illnesses. Typically, it's for monitoring and measuring. For identifying risk is really a planning standard more than anything else. So the planning phase of this standard is quite prevalent. It also gives you a proactive approach to health and safety in the workplace, providing a framework for continual improvement. All of the ISO standards are based on continual improvement. It's about planning, identifying risk, putting controls in place to address said risk, and then looking at parts where you can look into implementing areas of continual improvement and action. one of the great things with the ISO standards, and specifically ISO 45001, is it's not a management system that is there to manage staff. It's a management system that is there to promote involvement, engagement, allocating roles and responsibilities, and making sure that it is a system that works and aligns with your best business practices. So what businesses need ISO 45001? The answer is any business can have ISO 45001. It doesn't matter of your size, your complexity of processes, where you operate. 45001 is an international standard, so it can apply all over the world. We're starting to see it turn up in tenders. You may notice that in tender applications, you may go through and it might say, do you have a health and safety management system? This also ties in with that. If you have a business that is potentially working within an industry that could be deemed as high risk, obviously a great excuse for you to be able to go ahead and get ISO 45001 certification. On the right hand side here as well, you can see that there is some statistics based around health and safety, looking at worker deaths, where the deaths were originated from. So the majority of them came from falling at height. 1.8 million working people suffered from a work-related illness in 2021 and 2022. 61,000 non-fatal injuries to workers in 2021, 2022, and it cost 5.3 million in fines, average of £80,000 per conviction. So one thing that we may address throughout these slides and 45001 is unlike ISO 9001, which is the quality management system, which is built on best practice, ISO 45001 does have a body that also works alongside it, being the HSE, and they are the ones that we're looking at handing out them fines. So it's making sure that your legal and compliance obligations are up to date, and ISO 45001 helps with that. Sure, we'll talk about that shortly though. So what does ISO 45001 cover? So a little bit later, we're going to look into something called the Plan, Do, Check, Act methodology. But effectively, it's about planning, checking what you're doing, delivering, and then acting upon and putting continual improvement in place. And a lot of this on the screen here is about the planning phase. So context of the organization was a part of the standard which was introduced within the last 10 years. And it effectively means it's any internal or external factor that you could potentially have little to no control over that could effectively change overnight, and that could cause issues to your health and safety management system. So things like the pandemic, things like changes in legislation, changes in industry practices. These are all external factors which have kind of been considered. And then what you would do is then look at potential risk controls, objectives, and targets in place. What's effectively happened is the planning phase has taken a little step further back, and we're now planning business practice and planning risk to business rather than risk to business activities. There's the introduction of leadership and worker participation. So like we talked about in a couple of slides ago, where we're talking about how there's more of an encouragement for staff to be involved and have engagement with the management system and share roles and responsibilities. This is a key area. So it was quite common of old ISO standards for them to be a standalone system that would work alongside. So you may hear most companies will say, well, we have a quality management system, but our quality manager handles it. That's not so much the case anymore. Yes, it can be managed and maintained by one person, but there is an emphasis on having that leadership and commitment and having worker participation. And one of the benefits of that is, in a previous role myself, being a quality manager, I would be quite clued upon our internal processes, procedures, and risk internally, but I wouldn't know too much about what external contexts were affecting our business. Maybe the managing director would know that. Maybe the finance manager would know that. So it's about bringing in all the relevant members of the management team or even operational team and making sure that there's that worker participation. So you can cover things like context of the organization, risk to business. It's about bringing in the appropriate organizational knowledge. And then also when it comes to the health and safety management system, obviously you can go ahead and put health and safety risk assessments in place, but we need that worker participation to be able to say, well, actually, we've gone out to site and this has changed, so we need to consider this. So it's about having that involvement, opening up that communication, and making sure that it is a two-way channel between leadership and the workers. Planning, a little bit of what we've just spoken about now encompasses the planning phase, but planning is looking at risk. So it's hazard identification and assessment of risk. It's looking into if there is any risk to business, any risk to individual activity, any risk to any individuals, and it's about identifying and managing that risk. One of the most common ways is to look into things like risk assessments, but from that, then what you can do is then set yourself objectives and targets, which then go forward and promote continual improvement. And then support. I mean, once we've planned, we've looked at risk, we've looked at what risks are there for business, what risks are there for our staff, our workers on site and off-site. What support can we provide them? Is there any physical support that we can give them in regards to things like PPE equipment? Is there anything like emotional support? Is there anything that you can have behind these risk assessments, processes and procedures? Is there the right training that's being provided? Is the right equipment being provided? It's about then looking at the risk of effectively any processes or procedures that you have in place and making sure that the adequate support is there to be able to provide the best service that you can safely. And then we go into operations. So now we've got to a point where we've looked at all of the external factors of the business. We've looked internally at who's going to be involved within the management system. We've then looked at planning business risk. We've then provided adequate and we've reviewed the support that we provide. Now we go ahead into operations. So operations, when it comes to ISO 45001, is in parts a statement to say operations are carried out in accordance with everything we have already planned, which would be, in this case, maybe health and safety risk assessments, health and safety training, health and safety meetings. But there is also an element of change and looking at the current situation that you're in, the current environment, and if required, reducing risk, changing risk assessments, changing processes, procedures, and equipment to match the current operations in which you're under. Sometimes you may go into a building and you may do a few risk assessments. Then when you actually get there on site, you'll notice that maybe some machinery is moved and you're actually now working in a confined space. So that would be then identifying, reducing the risk, and making a change to any planned procedures that you currently may have in place. So that comes to operations. Once operations is complete, you would then evaluate. So you would look at the performance, look at what you have done. Where has there been any near misses, any accidents? Has there been any changes made to any processes and procedures that you may have? And once you evaluated it, you would then again make sure that you've got the right leadership and worker commitment to this area, because the feedback is crucial on any ISO management system, having that level of communication there. And making sure that all of the data is evaluated. So when it comes to evaluation as well, there's two procedures that are quite common. They are common within ISO, which is internal audits and management reviews. So we actually do webinars on internal audits and management reviews. So you might be able to catch one of them at a later date. But briefly, internal audits, we're going to be checking the inputs of the management system. So making sure the correct policies, processes, and procedures are in place. And then management review, we're going to be looking at the outputs. So we're going to be looking at the performance of the management system collectively over a specific period of time, which typically tends to be at least annually. Then once we've got all of that data, we've got all of the planning and risk management in place, we've got all of the operations, the correct support, correct leadership training, then we look at continual improvement and we look at maybe what can we improve here, what have we got in place, and how can we build upon this to make our management system more effective and potentially improve the health and safety of your operations. So, Plan, Do, Check, Act, I did mention it earlier. So now this should make a little bit more sense. So all of ISO standards are built on this Plan, Do, Check, Act methodology, and it basically creates a wheel of continual improvement. So planning, like we've just said, we're looking at context of the organization, we're looking at risk to business, and we're looking at the support we can provide by doing the planning side of things and looking at what hazard identification that we may have. Then we have the doing, which is going onto site, carrying out the tasks, carrying out the challenges, looking into if there's any changes that need to be made. Then we would do the check-in. We're going to look at the data. We're going to look at the monitoring and measuring. We're going to be doing our internal audits and our management review. And then we've got acting, where we would implement any change, continual improvement, non-conformity. So that's how the wheel of continual improvement works. And that's exactly the same for any ISO standard. So if I was to take ISO 14001, which is the environmental, exactly the same. Identify risk, operate in accordance with everything that is planned, check on the data and the information that we've got in place, and then act upon that and put processes and procedures in place. The benefits of ISO 45001. I mean, before we even talk about individual ISOs, one of the benefits of ISO is it's a great mark to have on your business to say, do you know what? We have a management system in place. We do manage and maintain it on an annual basis, and at least once annually, we're annually with an external auditor come and give us a surveillance audit to make sure that our policies, processes, and procedures are in place. So that's before we even go into the specific ISOs. So talking specifically about 45001, it can help reduce workplace accidents, boost productivity, win more business, which was I was talking earlier a little bit about tenders, save money, streamlining processes, procedures, identifying risk before they happen, all great ways to save money, enhances your reputation. I said that at the beginning. And then it helps better legal compliance. So as part of the monitoring and measuring side of things, just to go back, when we were talking about check-in, which is monitoring, evaluating strategies. Sorry. One of the things you can do there is monitor legal and compliance obligations. So one of the key parts of ISO 45001 is to look into any legislation, whether it be industry-specific legislation or industry-specific certifications, best practices. It's about looking at what requirements they could potentially have. And you do this part of your planning for a process. So if you're looking at a hazard and you identify there's a hazard, before you put controls in place, you would look at applicable legislation to see if they govern, in fact, any controls that you may need to put in place. So one key part of it is being aware of what legislation that you have to be compliant to and monitoring that on an annual basis. So being able to achieve ISO 40001, it provides everything that we've just basically gone through. It provides the framework for you to monitor and measure more than anything. It helps better manage your health and safety processes, work-related injuries, any procedures that you may have. And the statement there on the end of that sentence saying it might be a lot easier to achieve than you may think. Because health and safety is quite prevalent in this country, it tends to be that when I do consultancies for 45001, that a lot is already being done, because a lot of it is based on legal requirements and the compliance and legal obligations that you have as a business. So ISO can tie onto that. So if you do have existing processes and procedures in place, we're not going to come in and rewrite your system for you. We will come in and write you a system, but we will lean on existing processes, policies, and procedures that you may have. For example, we may provide you with a health and safety policy statement, but you potentially may already have a health and safety policy. So we would lean upon that. Again, if you've got existing ISOs, the front half of the standard is pretty much done. When we're looking at context, the organization, and risk to business, it is only then that each individual standard has its own specific requirements within them areas. So if you've got the processes in place, like for example, the context of the organization, you may consider something like a business continuity plan or a SWOT or pest analysis or a risk register. These are all processes that you can then tweak and add additional standards to. So if you're doing a SWOT analysis, which looks into strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for business, from a environmental perspective, you may have specific things that you've documented. All you need to do is add in the health and safety, and there you go. You've taken an existing process that you've already got and adapted it to meet the requirements of ISO 45001. And if you are already a citation health and safety client, it will put a big smile on our faces as an ISO consultant, because the chances are when we'll come in, you'll have a considerable amount already in place, especially when it comes into the health and safety side of things and we're looking at risk assessments. The Atlas platform in itself is fantastic and help with that. So yeah, it gives us very little to talk you through, but it means that we can focus on the key areas that you don't have in place, so we can spend a bit more time there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. I think that moves us on, doesn't it, to my bit, which is how Citation can help. Well, before I do sort of launch into the logistics of how we can help, one of the really important things to consider with ISO is the fact that it links together a lot of regulation that appears to be separate. So, for instance, the Health and Safety at Work Act, a lot of things and regulations come underneath it, like the management regs, the COSH risk assessment regs, provision of use of work equipment regs, the other things like both of the sets of consultation regulations. All of it is structured really nicely in that plan, do, check, act, adjust sort of model that ISO 45001 does. And one of the other important things to note is at the moment, the HSE are very much looking at arrangements and stuff and what have businesses got in place. They launched, I don't know how many of you are aware, but they launched rather quietly their strategy last year. And that basically was focusing on things like, I think it was called protecting people and places. So they were looking at various different things around sort of building safety in light of Grenfell, but they were also in particular looking at things like work-related ill health and mental health and stress and the likes of that. So things like stress management falls into your management regulations, which falls into your plan, do, check, act, adjust. And as part of that, you need that director buy-in, you need the employees and your workers to be aware. So all of that is structured really, really nicely through 45001. But yeah, if any of you aren't aware of the HC's strategy, I would take a look at it because they are very, very much sticking to it. I think after the pandemic, they sort of, I hesitate to say went off the boil, because they certainly didn't, but they sort of quietly didn't really do much on their strategy, and they actually were focused much more on COVID inspections and the like. So, but part of what they're doing at the moment, they're looking through other things focused on ill health rather than safety. So if you have a workplace where, for instance, you've got risk assessments in place where you've looked at your existing tasks and you think, yeah, we're doing a fantastic job, all of our guarding's in place, great. But say, for instance, if you are processing wood, things like that, you're sanding things down, and actually that's a new process, or you've got some new equipment and you haven't reassessed your controls, that will indicate to them that you haven't done the plan, do, check, act, and adjust it, and then you haven't reviewed it again. So they are currently looking at dust, they're looking at silica, they're looking all over the place, but it's all of the stuff that's quite hard to control. So they're looking as a business, are people putting in reasonably practicable measures? So what they can do when you balance up time, cost, effort, and investment to make sure that health and safety risks are controlled. And then from there, they're then going, right, you've got this documented risk assessment, fantastic. Have the workers seen it and do they understand it? I can tell you now the amount of places when I used to go in and do an inspection, and I'd get a good impression as to how good their health and safety was from the car park, because you can sit there and you can watch how people are interacting with the traffic. If you've got forklift trucks, for instance, whizzing around the place and very little control on there, and it all seems quite normal. You sort of get an impression as to how much businesses have actually looked at things. Another really good example of that is occupational road risk. You turn up to an office and you think this is fantastic, but they've got people driving on business, no risk assessments, no control over the cars, no control over their training, no checks on their licenses. So, actually it all links in. So having this review and act process in place is really, really crucial. So part of ISO 45001 does help you do that. And a lot of it is down to sort of monitoring and looking at what you've got in place. And that's kind of where we come in as Citation, because we will help you put in that framework. So you get someone, for instance, like me turning up, and we're not sort of clipboard warriors. So don't worry, I'm not going to, you wouldn't get me turn up site in a high vis and sort of bashing with a clipboard. It's much more the case that we'll go in and actually work out what you're doing, and we'll write a really comprehensive report, which will give you some key indicators, all prioritized as to what you need to do, when and why. So, a good example of this actually was when I was working as a consultant. I went into one of the businesses near me. Fantastic that they got us in, and they clearly made a lot of investment. And one of the investments they'd made was that they bought a brand new metal pressing machine. So these are certain requirements. Part of it is the HSE are always quite keen to make sure that no one can get behind them, because the metal fires out at quite a rate, and it, obviously, if you come into contact with it, it's not great. So they've replaced their old one precisely for that reason, because it was dangerous. The new one had a nice cage around the outside, and bless her, the finance director was walking around with me going, yep, we've made like 50 grand's worth of investment here, loads of money. And I just stood there and waited for her to sort of see it. And someone had cut a hole in the guard at the back. So she'd made all of this huge investment, and they cut a hole in. So she was obviously really cross, and I could understand why. But they hadn't actually told the workers why they'd made the investment, and they hadn't told the workers that the workers were concerned that this machine was slightly slower, because they weren't just running around the back picking up the metal and going. They had to wait for the interlock to disengage because it was safer. But at no point had anyone said, we know this machine is slightly slower, so don't worry about meeting the same target you had before. People were going in and trying to make sure that they still maintain their targets, and that's all down to communication, and actually seeing that risk assessment, understanding why they've made that investment. So that's why worker involvement is so important. And again, that's part of what we can help with. Actually going in, having a look, helping to make sure that your policy is tailored so that it's set up so that you know that you're going to have all of the things that you need. So, for example, we can talk you through how to do consultations, at what point you need to involve workers with risk assessment. We can support with that sort of stuff. So again, really important things. But like I said, we can set you up with a tailored policy. You also get e-learning from us as well, and we can give you points on that. And if you do need extra support from us, you can get one of the trained consultants in. We've even got sector specialists in certain areas too. So even if your local consultant isn't the one that specialises in a certain bit of machinery or equipment, there's about 110 of us now across the UK who can sweep in and help. So there's always support there for you. But really, it's a lot of it is about just making sure that you're planning, you're doing those corrective actions where you're identifying them, checking that what you're doing is accurate, and that's again where we will come in and acting on that. And I've just called up actually some statistics. So I don't know how many of you will be working on in things that may, for instance, be dust related or whatever. But the latest stats are, I think, from the HC that I think 13,000 people each year are made ill or die from work-related lung diseases and the like, from occupational exposure. To put that into context, that is roughly the population of the town of Whitby or Berwick-upon-Tweed or Mablethorpe in Lincolnshire. I've tried to pick holiday destinations, or Saltdean in East Sussex, which is a fabulous Lido, by the way, brilliant Art Deco structure. But in the entire populations of each one of those towns, one of those towns dying off every year. So that's why they're focusing on this area. So all of this links into your plan, do, check, act, and adjust. But that's really it from me. I don't know if anyone's got any other questions. I think we're running fairly well to time at the moment.
There's a couple that have just come in that I can grab. So the answer to this one, Richard, is no, I don't have any specific data. The reason that I say it helps towards is because I don't have the data there to be able to suggest that it definitely does. The reason that we say it helps towards is because what we're going to be doing is introducing processes that are going to be externally audited, which are then pushing you towards identifying potential hazards, risks, accidents, and it's making sure that the processes are in place to use. There's still an element with any ISO, I think it's important to say, is that even though you can implement all of the processes, policies, and procedures, they need to be used. The best way that I describe any form of ISO management system is doing what I did in the pandemic, is buying an exercise bike, going on it twice in the space of 12 months, and then complaining as to why I was putting on weight. The exercise bike's fantastic if you get on and use it, and it's the same. You'll see the benefits with any ISO management system if you use them, if you put the processes, policies, procedures in place, and then get on and do the Tour de France on it, you'll be fine. So I don't have any specific data, but it does tend to lead towards sort of the statistics which we were referencing.
So what might interest you, Richard, is that we have run some data on citation clients versus industry averages, and you're 75% less likely to have a reportable incident at work if you're a citation client, and you're 13 times less likely to have an employment tribunal claim as well. So they have run stats on that for us internally, but again, it's ISO wise, I'd leave that to Chris. But statistically speaking, citation clients are less likely to have an accident.
That answers your question anyway. There was another one. The time frame for implementation. Also another one I said implemented. I can't give you specific on costs. There's a lot of variables to take into account. And the time frame, it completely depends on your internal processes, procedures that you may have. Some clients that we can go in, they'll have a fantastic system already. We'll go in, look at what they've got, and they might be able to achieve certification within a month. Some may take a little bit longer. So our stage process of how we go through certification is we'll arrange a consultancy with you where we will get, or a compliance audit, in which we will go through the requirements of the standard. And what we'll do is we'll look at what you have current state against where you need to be. We'll then provide you with effectively a gap analysis, but it's a consultancy report. And along that, we'll raise a number of tasks within Atlas, which is our online platform. Them tasks are under two grades. So we have client to address and client to address immediately. We need to ensure that any immediate tasks are completed prior to certification. So dependent on how long it would take you to complete them tasks, you would then book in what we call a certification audit or a stage 2 appointment, where we will have an auditor come back and audit you purely based on the immediate tasks which need to be completed. Once they have been completed, then you can be awarded certification. So it is quite a simple, streamlined process. But like I say, there are variables in there which can, from both sides, as well, dependent on how busy our office staff are and how many reports they've got to process, may add a couple of days on. But then again, it's down to the tasks and how long and how much time you would like to implement. But we have been known to do it fairly quickly. But again, depends what variables are there.
So the other thing is, I suppose it's the time saved in future. I can remember one of the first things I started out in health and safety doing was, and I'm sure when I say this, there'll be a horrible collective in the room, was my first sort of job in health and safety was to fill out the pre-qualification questionnaires, which are lovely, and all the supplier vetting forms, which I used to hate doing. But actually, having 45,001 or having citation really does help, because with the policy and the like, you can actually just sort of throw that at most of them and go, yeah, we've got this. We've got the external competent advice, we've got training, we've got accident reporting history, we've got health and safety manuals and the like. So it does make it all a lot simpler. But yeah, it's with regard to all of this as well. And I think, Chris, you mentioned about Atlas. If you do have citation and ISO, all of the actions from both of our reports would file through into that same system. So actually, the likelihood is, if you've had your citation visit and you've closed off the stuff we've identified, you get your ISO relatively, there wouldn't be that much for the ISO team to actually identify. It might be more procedural. So, actually that tends to speed things up too.
yeah, having a single sign-on for the two systems is quite beneficial, because from our side we can go in and see what you've got, and so can they. So it's quite a good system to be able to implement from both sides. So yeah. Also, I believe our moderator was saying that you're probably going to receive a phone call regarding to getting a copy of these slides in the next couple of days. And on that call, Daniel, if you want to ask about costing and pricing, they'll be able to address that for you and talk you through that.
Just had another one in from Rachel, I think. But okay. Sorry, I've just seen that one come up.
Oh, thanks. Mature, a mature business, but needs a mature. Okay. What is the ongoing maintenance registration costs? Day rates. Again, the phone call, they'll be able to talk all through that with you.
I think from our point of view, Daniel.
Okay.
Sorry. No, sorry. I thought you'd frozen actually.
No, it's.
I was going to say, if you did choose to go with, have citation services as well, your consultant will turn up and actually get to know. We give you time so that they get to know you as a business and how you operate. One of the first things we'll do is actually have a proper look round. It's to be honest, it can be quite interesting sometimes. But you'd find if you've got stuff in place that's already there, if you've got your own risk assessment examples, things like that. We could help you with those as well. So we are fairly flexible. But sorry, Chris, I'll let you.
That's all right. Yeah, I'll take this one. It depends what. It all comes down to what contracts and things that you may have. I won't bore everyone else by talking about contracts and what everything are in place. But at Citation ISO, we offer two products. We offer integrated management systems, where we can take a number of systems at point of sale and say, okay, we're going to take the 91445 and write you an integrated management system in which you would get one bank of processes or one manual, depending on what system that you've got. And then we also have standalone. If you have got standalone and you're wanting to add an additional one, you can integrate your controls on your side. Like, for example, you can carry out an integrated management review. You can carry out an integrated internal audit program. But as far as it goes with adding, it would be an extra audit for that individual. But like I say, you can take multiple management systems and integrate them by combining your controls and procedures that you have internally. But it wouldn't be as simple as us saying, okay, we're going to add ISO 45001 on the end, but what we'll do is we'll just add a little bit on the end of your current audit scheme schedule that you have with us. It would be an additional audit for the additional certification, if that makes sense. Let me just read this 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, this might be something that I might need to address outside of the webinar, because I think there's a few questions in here.
Yeah, there are a fair few, aren't there? I'm just looking at that. Again, it is fairly nebulous as a question, and you have addressed quite a bit in there, Tim. I think the immediate thing that comes to mind for your business in particular. Again, I don't want to I don't want to make lots of assumptions about how you're running things and even what sort of industry you're in with regard to consultancy. However, one of the areas I did address earlier, which is prevalent and is a very easy win for the HSE, is stress management. So you need to have a look at that, have a look at your stress risk assessment and the HSE 6 management standards. And I would start getting some outline work in on there. You might also need to consider things like an employee assistance program, which we offer. But again, there are others that are on the market which are relatively competitive. But that's the area that I think the HSE are looking at with all businesses at the moment, in particular since the pandemic. So again, I would have a look at that and look at what controls you can put in that are reasonably practicable.
Yeah, as far as an ISO perspective goes, it completely depends on what internal process and procedures that you have for me to determine what you haven't got. I mean, I can see obviously you're giving me a list of things there that you do have in place, but individual ISOs have individual requirements. So, for example, if you've got a 9001 internal audit program and management reviews, the 45001 internal audit program and management reviews are going to be slightly different. So, there's going to be items that you'll cover off within a health and safety management review that won't be covered off within. So, even though some things do cross over from standards, there are still individual requirements. But if you want in any more information on sort of what you've currently got and what you need to be, like I say, you can all expect a phone call, and you can discuss that with them on the phone, and they'll be able to give you more information and guidance, if that helps, without me going through all of your process and effectively carrying out an audit and doing a consultancy for you. I don't have more information.
It's one where I'm looking at, and I think it's one of the ones where I'm like, if I was on site, I could tell you. You kind of have to be there, don't you? But no, thanks for your question, Tim. Hopefully that's given some pointers.
Okay, I believe is that it? Okay, right. So that was the Q&A, right? So ISO Mentor. Just going to just in there as well. I know there's been a lot of talk about mental health and safety as well. Additionally, there is ISO 45003. If you go down the route of going 45001 and you want to expand on psychosocial risk and mental health and safety, Citation ISO certification do ISO 45003, which focuses on psychosocial risk as well, which is becoming more of a talked about subject, let's say. ISO Mentor as well. So ISO Mentor, I know that Michael mentioned earlier that we have e-learning on the platform. We have Atlas. We also have ISO Mentor. So ISO Mentor is a subscription-based system where you would pay per month for access to the system. And the system is webinars such as this, where we would take an individual section of the standard, maybe something like context the organization, and deliver more of an interactive webinar on that by our industry professional. The webinars are kept quite low in number so that we can have more of an interaction, but there's a schedule involved with it. You can learn everything about all of the standards. Obviously, we're expanding over time, introducing more standards. I think at the minute we cover 914 and 45 within there. So if you're wanting to go down the route of a bit more of in-depth learning rather than a one-size-fits-all sort of webinar, and you want to be a bit more specific on individual areas, ISO Mentor is the one for you. You can obviously contact Citation about that. Why Citation? Why us? I mean, from my personal perspective, we have a massive range of field consultants that have knowledge of multiple industry. We've seen the systems implemented 100 different ways. We have the knowledge and experience and a great team. The experts really know what they're talking about. You can either go down the option of having a compliance audit where we would look at your existing processes and give you a one-off audit. Or you can go down the consultancy route where we can go down, write you a tailored system, look at what processes, policies, and procedures you've got in place, and create a management system that would be certifiable to ISO 45001. We try and keep things simple. We try and train as well as implement. Obviously, we're part of a larger group as well. Obviously, with Michael being here, there are a lot of things that we can do in Citation outside of what we've spoken about. There is lots and lots. If there's anything you wanted to look to add to your business, whether it be anything from DBS checks to fire extinguishers to food safety, all I would say is before you go looking anywhere else, just have a conversation with us, because there is a chance that somewhere in group we will be able to assist you with that. But yeah, we can connect you with SSIP, SMAS. There's lots in group that we can provide with, and you keep it all under one roof as well, with Atlas. Which brings us to technology. 24/7 access to Atlas. It's online based, so you can access it from your computer, your tablet, your mobile, wherever you are. I was in the middle of the Highlands last week in Scotland on it, and it worked perfectly fine. The internet didn't as much, but the site did. We also, within the Atlas system, we have banks and banks and banks of templates that can help with a lot of different areas of ISO. I know that the health and safety side of things does as well, and we have a lot of guidance material on there as well, a lot of training videos and a lot of walkthroughs. So yeah, it's we have a bot on there that can answer questions. Yeah, it's a one-stop shop for ISO certification on our side of things, and it's a great system. Once you get using it, it has a tasking system involved, so you can allocate tasks. But yeah, it's really, really good. And here's a few useful links. Obviously, I know there's been a couple of people that have asked whether they're going to get copies of the slides. We're going to contact you in the next couple of days, and we're going to ask you if you would like a copy, and then they'll send you a copy over. When you do get that copy, these links will work because they won't currently work at the minute. You can try and tap your screen, but you won't be able to get on them. But the top one is a little bit more information about ISO 45001, and then there's the 45001 guide, and then at the bottom, access to Atlas there. And I believe that is it as far as the webinar goes. Obviously, if you're wanting more information, if you call up the number there or email our sales, they'll be able to put you in contact with the right person, right company, right department. Yeah, and if you have any further questions for me, I'm more than happy to drop my email down in the chat. If you've got anything you want to talk about ISO related, even if it's not ISO 45001, maybe you've got an existing standard you've got a question about, by all means, pop me a question. I will put my email in the chat. Make sure I spelled it right. There we go. I can actually see there's a question coming there from Gemma that I didn't pick up on. Oh yeah, moderator's already grabbed it. Yes, Gemma, just to verbalize that. We do webinars like this probably about a monthly basis. Do we say around about every once a month, where we provide webinars on everything. And I've done 14,001 ones before. If you actually go onto our website as well, go onto our Citations website, you can actually go through and see previous recorded webinars, and you'll be able to find one on there for 14,001. We've done quite a few now, so yes. I think that is everything that I need to talk about. Is there any more questions at all? I assume not. Okay. Well, in that case, it's been a pleasure to chat to you all. Thank you, Michael, for joining me.
Very well. Thanks, everyone.
I wish you all the best with your health and safety journey, and maybe see you again in the future. All right. Thanks, guys.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone.